The NHL playoff picture is still up in the air, but here in Winnipeg, fans are confident the arena will echo with the sound of white noise again.
Free socks.
Let's go! Go, Jets, go! Winnipeg is back in the big leagues and over the moon.
Welcome back to the landing strip as the Winnipeg Jets drop their third straight, this one to a New York Islanders team whose season was pretty much put to bed yesterday from the New York Rangers. You catch them on the back-to-back and a chance to put the final dagger in it. And not quite what we saw in this one. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of angst. I'm sure there's going to be a lot to talk about. I have many, many thoughts on where this thing's trending. But I don't want to do this alone. Mikey, how you doing tonight?
You know, I hate being right because when I'm right, it's never about anything good, not once. This game really showed us, I think, that the Jets need that help. They need that backup. This is not, it's a really good group. They can go deep, but they're still short just that extra little bit to really put them over. And I think this was a highlight of that in so many different spots. So we're gonna get into all of it with the chat and everything. So, but yeah, that's how I'm feeling right now. Annoyed that we're kind of proven to be right, that they do need that help still.
And there's things to come. I'm going to jump into the chat real quickly. I see Slick McGuire, evening all. Can't hang around too long as I need to be up for work in 2 hours, but stopping by to say hi and listen while I drop off. The fact you're here 2 hours before work out in Europe, you're a real one. Appreciate you being here. Big Papa says the first comment tonight for the show. Sell the farm, sell the picks. Chevy, I'm bagging you. Choices TK says, amazing 3 losses, and the chemistry crowd now think, well, maybe they need to make a splash at the deadline. I see Progies 11 is done with Appleton, and I like where he's going with his lineup here, and he wants to see Nelson, Ehlers, Perfetti, Lowry, Nino in a trade. The people are seeing the vision that we've been talking about after 3 straight losses, and I'm here to say it, or I'm here to talk about it. Pretty interesting game for the Winnipeg Jets today. Interesting might be the wrong word. Really frustrating start to this one. That first period was not great. Not great from the Winnipeg Jets. They come into this game without Dylan Sandberg, which, I mean, if you've listened to this show, you know how much I believe Dylan Sandberg is a foundational piece to what makes the Winnipeg Jets successful. I've made no secret that I think he's a 4th or 5th most valuable player on this team. So they come in without him tonight. And I guess my rosy takeaway from all this, the end of the day, it's 3 straight losses. Team's still in first. They're coming off some big streaks. Is this the right time for them to go on a bit of a shooting bender to send a message to the management team? That's where I come in here. If there was any doubt Chevy was swinging before, I think this week should erase that. I really do.
It's going to be interesting to see how aggressive this makes him or not, and whether something like a trade to take away some of the toys may be in order, because we can't be one injury away from a decor that you look at it and go, oh dear God, we have one pairing. Like you can't. For a team that has
And
championship aspirations, you can't have that, right? So there needs to either be a lot of depth added, and like we talked about in the last episode, a very specific kind of depth, or they need to start taking that toy away from him, because it was just another example tonight of a pairing of two guys who, when they're separated and with responsible partners, you can maybe get away with, but as soon as you put them together, it's hat on fire every time.
And I don't even think they had that in this game. Both the top 4 pairs I thought really struggled.
True.
Morrissey and DeMello, especially in the first half, first 40, I thought they had a better stretch as that game went on. And then the quote-unquote second pair was absolutely unplayable. And really, this should not be a shock to anyone. Let's start on the D conversation, because I see on Twitch, Pierogies 11, DeMello in over his head playing with Mo sometimes. HH Living Loco, DeMello is not ideal, but the Pionk away from Sandberg thing is even scarier. That and playoff Stanley. Pierogi says 100% right time to drop some games. Pierogi says, we'll get into that comment too. I want to talk about Maroon's comments. I want to talk about everything going around the league today. Maybe not as much about this game. Let's look at the bigger picture and what this game and this stretch is telling us. How does that sound if we approach this a little bit different tonight? We're also going to be recording a trade deadline primer when we get off tonight, so look for that tomorrow. It's going to be about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, just diving into the Jets cap position, diving into their assets, what they could be worth, what they should be looking for, and why. So be on the lookout for that tomorrow. But let's start on the D conversation, because I think that is the most evident conversation coming out of this game. They have Josh Morrissey, they're missing Dylan Sandberg, and they go to shit. I do agree with Pierogi's comments that Dylan DeMello looked over his head at times in this one. And then the other thing that just stands out to me plain as day is, for the last 4 years, the Winnipeg Jets management group has so badly wanted Pionk Stanley to be their future second pair. And this is what it looks like when you get it on a back-to-back against a team like the Islanders, who honestly, yeah, there's some bigger guys there, but it's not a tough team to handle. And it's scary to me, because I think the chat's kind of right. And I see Blake Rist over on YouTube now saying Jets need 2 D-men, someone to bump down Pionk and another to move out Stanley. So when we're talking about this conversation, the Jets have 2 what I consider top pairing level left-handed defensemen in Dylan Sandberg and Josh Morrissey. The right side has been where we've been talking about, like, I think they need an upgrade to push these guys down a slot. Pionk on the third pair in a protected role where he could produce offense. DeMello not being in the spotlight of the top pair if you could pull it off. And I think a game like today really shows you that level of things. And if the Winnipeg Jets lose one of Josh Morrissey or Dylan Sandberg, this decor's toast. Dylan DeMello is on the downside. I think he's been playing good hockey over the last stretch compared to the first half. Yep. But a game like today is going to worry you. And Neil Pionk, I will continue hammering home the point. That is not a top 4 NHL defenseman. That is one that's been playing beside a top pairing caliber guy that's carried his weight and cleaned up all of his mess. And on a night like today, what was the numbers behind that pairing? Give me 1 second here, because it was ugly to watch. I mean, they're not even sitting at a 20% expected goals. They're not sitting at they're not even at 50-50 on shot attempts. And I made a tweet about this, and I got a little comment from Dmitry Filipovic going back on it. When Neil Pionk's next to Dylan Sandberg, that's a second pairing that's controlling expected goals and shot share at 55+ margins. And as soon as Neil loses Dylan Sandberg, it's a 44% player. You're losing those minutes. And what's frustrating about this, and I hate to start the show off this way, they're signing him tomorrow or Thursday. It's coming. There's no more thing about it. It's coming. And I believe they're in the range on a number. I believe term's been kind of where they're going back and forth. I'm expecting a 5 or 6 year deal in the next 2 days at a $6.5+ million evaluation. And you just can't afford to do that. These games, when you don't have the partner to carry the load, is exactly why. And all that to be said, how does Logan Stanley lead the team in 5-on-5 minutes, Scotty? How?
That's his guy. That's his guy. He likes the size. We've talked about it over and over again. That is Scott. They see something in him that they just absolutely, and like you said, they want Logan Stanley and Neil Pionk to be that long-term second pair, getting 3+ minutes a night at 5-on-5 at special teams. That's the view that they have in that guy when they drafted him. And by God, they're going to try to make it work. We've seen it every time. As soon as there's an injury to one of the top 4 on the left-hand side, Logan Stanley is the first choice to go, whether that's on the very top pair with Dylan DeMello, what's on the second pair to play with Neil Pionk. That is their guy ready and waiting. We've seen it over and over again. It's not an experiment. We keep talking about it like, oh, the Logan Stanley experiment. It's not an experiment. This is what is happening. We've done the experiment, we've tested it, and they went, yep, I like this. So that is what it is, right? It's the Logan Stanley experience now. It's no longer an experiment. And it's, yeah, we're frustrated by it, but like we've talked about, without Chevy taking the toy away or something massively drastic coming in to kind of push him down another slot, that is the guy. And that's the way it's going to have to be. Unfortunately, I don't know what else we need to see to have them make a change. We didn't even get a change up front, with some line shuffling and things on a 3-game skid when you can see that they're disjointed and not being able to put it together. So to think that all of a sudden when the trades come in that, this was all just a test and Logan Stanley's really not going to play going forward because they added, Wallman or whoever, I think it's a fallacy. I think we're fooling ourselves if we think that that's what it is.
Yeah, I don't know about the 6.5 for sure. What it's been suggested to me is it's going to fall somewhere between 35 and 40 mil. So, I mean, you could start doing the math backwards from there. We'll see if it happens. I mean, I'm not an insider. I don't break things. This is just some of the conversation I'm hearing. And we've kind of been talking about that. The Jets have been obsessed with the idea. I talked 2 shows about the idea that I believe the Jets were going to shop for a forward because they're going to get Pionk done. It seems like they're close here. We'll see what happens. I hope it falls through. But the Winnipeg Jets are about to make that commitment. I firmly believe it. And it just emphasizes the need for a swing even more. I do think a guy like Jake Wallman or Alexiak will play more minutes than a Stan in that kind of situation, but I would expect Logan Stanley to play on his offhand beside someone like that, or an Alexiak to play on his offhand behind Stanley. I do think Stanley's not coming out of the lineup, but I do think they would trust a veteran with that kind of name more. And yeah, it's basically the way I see this game. It highlighted the Winnipeg Jets' 2 biggest problems. We've spent some time talking about the forwards here, the defense here. And it's a huge issue. They have to make an impact add there. We got a scoop from Drager. We'll get into that a little bit. But this team just has no insurance for an injury. Like, none. You lose one of Morrissey Sandberg, it's a 5-game elimination. It's just the reality of what you're staring at. Despite how good the system has been at propping up the talent doesn't exist past those 2 players as far as what you want to see from a Stanley Cup level team. I want to look at the opposite side, actually, the forwards today. This was another game they don't score at 5-on-5. The offense has dried up. And this is something I think we've gotten pretty well on this show. It wasn't showing through on the results yet, but one thing I've consistently hammered home is at 5-on-5, the Winnipeg Jets don't create enough offense compared to where you want to be as a Stanley Cup contender. And I actually got into an interesting discussion on Twitter with Slam Dunk, Duncan Morrison, great guy. who had seen one of those money puck charts go out this weekend highlighting the top 20 goals per 60 lines in the NHL. And the top line wasn't on it. So reached out and was just like, hey, Nick, can you kind of explain the background here? And I think this is a conversation that more people have to come around on. And this is why I'm so adamant on swinging for a top 6 forward that could score as well. The Winnipeg Jets top line, and it's made headlines. You see it on TSN all the time. You see it in the market that this is the quote-unquote best top line in the NHL. This was a really tough night for them, by the way. The reality, all those goals that everyone's excited about comes because they've played almost 300 minutes more than any line in the NHL. First, second, third, any line in the NHL. They've played together all year. There's only been, before this conversation happened 2 days ago, so things might have changed a little bit. Haven't pulled it up. There has been only 11 lines as of 2 days ago that have played over 400 minutes together in the NHL. The Jets own 3 of them. Of those 11 lines, where do you think those lines would fit as far as what they're producing offensively, goals per 60 in their minutes at 5-on-5?
Middle of the pack.
So the top line comes 6th, right in the middle.
Yep.
The second and third lines come 10th and 11th of those groups.
Yep.
So the one thing that has been a core problem that hasn't been addressed because the team's winning and they were capitalizing.
Yep.
And that's a real thing. But if you want to look at where this is going, what they create at 5-on-5 has not been good enough to depend on these 4, 5, 6 chances as choices TK talked about last game. You're going to have to create more quality looks. You're going to have to score more goals in your minutes, or it's going to dry up like years past, which we've seen. And this is where I was getting so frustrated, and why I've harped on that conversation of trying new lines, seeing if there's a different mix. We know this top line is stuck together, and I think 3 things are true in this conversation. Kyle Connor has been a significantly better player this year than years past on that group. I think that group has been significantly better than last year's absolute dog water of a mess to watch. And the third being, they still don't generate enough offense consistently at 5-on-5 to be the type of line that's going to carry you to the ship, which is fine. They don't need it to be. One of the Jets' strength has been their depth. But what that means, because your 2 middle 6 lines aren't scoring at that pace, and you see the goals dry up until the power play wakes up today, you need upgrades in that middle 6 to make it one of those matchups where you go in the playoffs and you know what? You might have a worse first line. And that's okay. That first line is still going to score. They're going to create opportunities. That's a type of line that if you give them an inch, they're going to take advantage. So I understand the thought process behind it. And whether I bitch about it all night, we're not going to get a different look. And it is what it is at this point. Yep. But you now have to, because of that, really get the most juice out of your middle 6 and make that the advantage. And when you're stuck with the Lowry, Nino, Appleton version, and Appleton rightfully getting a lot of criticism in the chat, you're not going to be scoring with that group. Nope. We've seen the long stretches that group goes on, especially when Nino, we know, is a very streaky scorer. So when that goes away from Nino, who's supposed to be the one potting the goals on the line, it's not coming. So that's a line where you need some offensive juice coming out of this deadline. The second line, I've talked about it. They've gotten a lot better at generating off the rush, but they're an easy line to lean on in the D zone. And when we get to the playoffs and every mistake matters and all that zone time starts to pile up, it's going to be a problem. And this is why they've really handcuffed themselves going into this deadline with one set plan from day one, because the one set plan, if you did a little bit of digging, was a little bit flawed, and you should expect this. Now, this is not to say this thing's over. It's 3 games in the middle of the season. This is the right time to lose these. Your GM's on the trip. If it was ever a question if they needed help, I think this should be showing you that to get through 4 rounds, they do. But this is an area the coaching staff has to make adjustments.
So to point out as well, over on Facebook, Rob Somerville, one of the other reasons that line gets so much attention for their production overall is they also play the majority of their power play time together, right? They are absolutely together way more than any other line. So yeah, it's going to look that way. And then, yeah, just kind of looking at the rest of it, I don't know how many coaches or, hockey people you would talk to in a season and say, if you would have your lineup on night one be the exact same as game 64, I don't know how many would say, yeah, that's great. That's what we want. Because things change over the course of the season. They evolve, right? You should be able to kind of adapt to that and change and see where things are going. But instead, we have been absolutely steadfast in these are the lines, these are the roles, and we are not deviating from that. And we saw it early on, and we kind of dismissed it. We saw it in the middle, we kind of dismissed it. And we're at a point now where, no, this is what they want. Scott O'Neill in the post game as well said they were happy with what they did tonight. That they liked the pace, and the only issue was that they didn't score enough. So it's we keep I think we're putting our thoughts and feelings a little bit too much into Scott Ardeal and what they want to do and what we see, because I think we're seeing what they like and the lineup that they like and the guys that they want. I think this is the group.
It's the group until trades come, and I think Fat Tony 202 on Twitch kind of nails the outlook here of what we're talking about. Just puts a bow on it, and then we're going to dive into the chat. Lots in the chat. Someone on hold, maybe we could jump there too. Fat Tony 202 says first line isn't as strong as others. Second line is a mess some nights, fine others. Which, yeah, we've seen it. You're either going to get a fun night from that group, or it's going to be like, holy shit.
It's feast or famine.
And the third line is just never going to score consistently, and coaches won't change at all. They hate it. And I think when you're looking at Scott Ardeal, obviously he's got a lot of stake in this. This is his second opportunity in the NHL, and he's got a team in first place. And I get the hockey man thought of, you don't want to mess with a good thing. We've heard it in our chat. We've heard it on socials. We've heard it on TSN about the Jets chemistry. You don't want to mess with a good thing. The flip side to that is, I do expect coaches making multi-million dollars per year to understand all this, to have a bit of a bigger grip on the bigger picture and where it's developing to. I do expect a coach to be more hands-on with that. And at this point, we're looking at a coach that is so stuck in plan A, and I think plan A is leading them to a dangerous place, that the GM has to swing. There is just no more doubts about it. This 3 games should tell you this, because this goal drought should be expected. This was coming at some point. You're not going to score at that clip all year with what they're shooting like, and that's fine. That's fine. Stretches like this happen. Slumps like this happen.
Yep.
But when there's ways to get, it's how you bounce back from it, but it's also the decisions you make to try and get yourself out of it as well. Is there a more efficient way about going to the lineup? Is there a different way we can look at this? And Scott's been absolutely refused to go there. And like a night like tonight, where the top line's completely ineffective, no line movement, no like trying to get a spark. And it is frustrating, because I think it does impact how the GM looks at the deadline. I think it does impact the ceiling of this team. And I don't know, man.
Are we seeing the results of a coach who had a very public falling out with his first group as a head coach, who doesn't want to now set the apple cart kind of thing, right? He doesn't want to come in and cause too much of a ruckus, lose the room, as what happened the first time around. Are we maybe seeing some of those results of, these are the guys I want to play with, so yep, these are the guys you're going to play with, kind of thing?
Also, just to touch on the top line thing, and this will, I would imagine if we did a deep dive, this will look similar to some of the middle six group too, as far as offense here. And I'm just trying to find it. Choices TK, who's a regular in our chat, loves to dive into these convos, sent me a really interesting breakdown this weekend. So at the end of the day, everything we're talking about, everything the team is trying to do, all these discussions are for one reason, right? And it's to try and win the cup, or to try, for this team, it might be to try and get as deep as possible after years and years of disappointment. I'm going to give you some numbers that are a little bit concerning here. The Jets' top line versus playoff teams at 5-on-5. They're 17 goals for, 17 against. Shots 140 to 174. High Danger 69-61. If you remove the wildcard teams for that, who I expect the Jets to beat the 8th wildcard team this year, despite what we're talking about right now. That line is losing 11-10. They're getting outshot 104-90, and they're getting hammered in the high danger zones 43-31. If you look at only the West, it's a 3-1 deficit, 111 shots for, 70 against, or shots against 74, and 36-32 in the high danger areas. And I would imagine the second line looks awfully similar as well when you start to break down the games versus the competition you're going to run into. And I do think that there is ways, I've been long convinced of this, that you can get more out of the team. I will continue to believe we will never see it. I continue to believe if you were to split up Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor through the first two lines and roll Ehlers, Scheifele, Velarde, you give yourself 2 30 goal scorers on 2 separate lines. You get more juice out of the 5-on-5 production of the first line. You'd have to find a proper center this week for a guy like Connor. We're never going to see it. This is just hypothetical. Yeah. So if you're keeping the top line together, we've talked about it. Adam Lowry. Split up Adam Lowry and Nino Niederreiter. Get Nino with Perfetti. Get Ehlers with Lowry. And stop this Appleton nonsense. The fact that they're one of the only teams that believes this guy is as good as he is.
Multiple times.
Seattle told us that.
Yep. We talked a lot about this at the beginning of the year, whether it's relationships or results that ultimately went out with the group. I've been the Debbie Downer who's said that it's relationships that continually will win out because they've told us that. Mark Chipman has told us that in press conferences. Kevin Cheveldayoff has told us that in press conferences. That's just the way that it is with this team. That's just the way that it is. They've told us with no unplain language. So, and we're seeing that right now. Now, again, are they in still a very talented and deep group? Yeah, absolutely. Are they going to, still win more games than they're going to lose from here towards the end of the season? Most likely, yeah. Especially if they do get some extra help coming in for, at the deadline on Friday. But the thing is, if they're not willing to make those just small kind of internal tweaks, the things that we've seen have tangible results. We've seen it on the scoreboard. We've seen it with our eyes, with an eye test. We've seen it in the analytics. There are small changes that they can make, which they've had to do when forced into it, that are very positive for their group. But as soon as everybody's available again, as soon as everybody's healthy, we jump right back to plan A right at the beginning of the year, and we don't move off of it. So I don't know what's going to happen with the ads come Friday, because if it's not a super big swing, and not because they're not trying to, but just because things don't materialize, prices don't come to be where they want it, whatever the situation is. If it ends up being just some depth ads to, fill out the roster with some, NHL players, I think you're going to see this structure, this grouping with just those depth ads kind of cycling into the middle and bottom six when required. And we're going to have to pray that you're getting the good version of the Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, Gabe Velarde line every night in the playoffs, because otherwise, it's not going to be the deep run that they deserve after this record-setting season.
And I do want people to remember that's where the root of the frustration does come from. The Winnipeg Jets have shown that they have the potential to do something really special in this market with this team. And it feels like they're holding it back a little bit. And that's where the frustration comes from. I don't want to see the Jets fail. I want to see them try things to bring out the best version of this and go make trades to do it. Some of the comments in the chat I do think line up pretty well. Blake Grist, sorry if I mispronounced that, says on YouTube, Jets haven't had a 2C since Little left. This is a higher issue on the org being drafting, developing, or trading. I will push back that PLD did come through in that time frame. But you are seeing a bit of a lull from some really tough drafts and develops from, what was it, 2018, 2019 on.
Yep.
I think they've gotten better at that the last couple of drafts. There's been a new approach here, but I think that's a valid point. Rob Somerville says, as the season gets deeper and closer to the playoffs, the games down the stretch become more important, not to mention more difficult. And that's why we want to see them try things that could actually counteract that aspect. Big Papa says it's an org, or Nick, if you split up 81-55, means your second line has to play second line minutes and you can't give Appleton a ton of minutes. a great counter and reason why getting 230 goal scorers on two different lines might work. Hulk says there's no team in the league besides the Winnipeg Jet where the guy who's consistently positioned as the heart and soul of the team because he was their pick. I lost track there. I wanted to read the other one. I can't help but feel that the way the Jets handle things is just layers of misplaced loyalty and promises people are too afraid to break. And this is the thing. The Winnipeg Jets this week and moving forward, I said it earlier in the year and I'm coming back to it. To unlock something with this group, the Winnipeg Jets, as Dylan DeMello said it last summer as well, are going to have to get uncomfortable and start trying some things that are outside the box of that they've painted themselves into.
I wonder also how much the national attention on when the Jets were having those very public kind of locker room issues, right? There was a lot of stories out in the press and in the media about, oh, what's going on with the Jets locker room? Is there a divide, toxic, blah, blah, blah. I wonder if some of that type of attention is also impacting how they're dealing with things right now, trying to keep, everybody happy, trying to keep everybody, feeling good in that way and not wanting to shake it up too badly because of all that. I wonder if that also plays into it.
Yeah, it could be. A couple of comments here I enjoyed. Matt Rothman suggests I still think Chevy has a ton to say in players and who they play with, regardless of what he says. And I mean, it has been the one boss since the team has come back. And it's going to be an interesting week for Kevin Cheveldayoff. I feel like his life's work is on the line here, and it's going to take him getting uncomfortable as well to really put this thing over. Julian makes a great point on the idea of disrupting things and a coach having to sometimes step in. John Cooper has won 2 cups, and he hasn't been scared one iota to change stuff up if it isn't working. And John Cooper might have the hardest job in the NHL. Past the talent on his roster, think about managing those egos and what those changes mean within a room over the course of time. I like that point. Yep. On the idea of splitting up Scheifele and Connor, which, again, it's going to be us talking about it. It's never going to happen. I love where top line J goes. Connor, Lowry, Perfetti would fuck. And Big Papa says potential to get somebody prego with that line. Just try new ways that could bring out more offensively out of this team at 5-on-5, man.
Yeah, I don't know what. Again, yeah, there's no point in hopping back and forth on it because it's nothing on the ice. It's nothing on the ice. We can't point to anything that they've done while playing together to say, you shouldn't keep trying Ehlers and Lowry together. That you shouldn't keep, move Connor off of that line with Scheifele. It's a personal thing. It's the decisions that they've made on who they want to play with, and the coaching staff has decided that that's the best way going forward. But man, I wish it wasn't. I wish we were willing to be a little bit more creative, a little bit more proactive, especially when you have such a start for this year. They have, like you said, they have the opportunity to do something special right now to really get some incredible national attention on a deep run. Yeah, everything was lining up for it. I wish we'd be a little bit more creative with it.
Jet-centric, trying to rosy it up. The fun part is when the Jets don't trade their first-round pick, get bounced early, and McQueen might fall to them. We're not looking at prospects. This team is too good to be having those conversations.
No, not doing that now.
Let's move off of the frustrations, though, and move into some of the bigger conversation here. I saw Pierogies 11 had asked about it earlier on Twitch. Let's go there. Some of the talk around the league. And we got a really interesting interview from Pat Maroon, jumped on Morning Cup of Hockey over at DFO this morning. And honestly, Pat Maroon, watching him as an active player answer some of the questions he's asked, really impressive guy to listen to talk. Obviously, this is a guy that's been really well respected. He's been traded for every contender ever. He's added multiple cups. And he was asked towards the end of his interview about if he was a 26-year-old player who hadn't won any cups and they were looking towards their UFA, where would they go? And it was really interesting coming from Pat Maroon, who respected guy, right?
Yep.
He was hemming and hawing, talking about how open he feels the NHL is this year, which is another reason, Kevin Cheveldayoff, it's time to do the thing. But he arrived at the first the first name that he arrived at was, I think Winnipeg obviously looks really sexy. And I think that's important. We know this market is going to have its issues getting talent. And you kind of touched on it, where you believe Chevy's looking for a big swing now, and it might not be available to him. Found it really interesting to see Pat Maroon talk about that so publicly at this time of year, and I'm hoping it caught the ear of some players around the league. Hard to disagree with Pat Maroon. As much as we're talking about some of the frustrations and where this game could lead, this is still a team. Despite that rant, despite being fed up about certain things, that is well-positioned. Maybe the most well-positioned in the league right now. And it caught the eye of someone respectable. What do you think about that?
It's huge. Anytime you're getting attention like that put on the organization is massive. And that's come because not only this year, right, where, like we've talked about, they've set a bunch of records, not only franchise records, some NHL things like that. Hellebuck's on his way to, potentially breaking an NHL record for wins, all these type of things. Not only that, when you go back to last year, yeah, the playoff loss was rough, right? But they were, fourth in the NHL last year in points, finishing the year on an 8-game win streak or whatever it was. So it's starting to be a little bit consistent, right? That's what I think is being noticed by the guys who are, the winners, the respected guys who have done this, who can look at a situation and go, I see something building there, something brewing. And if you can get that attention and guys talking publicly like that, hopefully they'll be talking privately like that. And when the time comes to, an agent to ask their guy, hey, there's an offer, do you want to take a trade to Winnipeg? They'll be a little bit more willing to think about it and say yes, even if they have, checked off the no box on whatever fucking survey that was sent out before. It's different when it's in your face. The opportunity has come to you. You're on a team that's probably falling out of the playoffs. Hey, do you want to finish off your year playing for a first place NHL team that's, over the last 2 years is just absolutely killing it? Yeah, I think that's fantastic.
Yes, and Rye Guy goes somewhere. Let's keep this going on talking about some of the stuff we're hearing around the league. Rye Guy 990 over on Twitch says, the narrative that Dregs mentioned was interesting. And if we're taking a little victory lap, I feel pretty good about how I read that Drager situation the other day. Told you he was being leveraged, that Chevy didn't like the prices. His tone sure changed today. And I'll pull up his quotes here. But to complete going on Rye Guy's points as I look for it, Rye Guy says, complete tone shift from what's come out the past couple of days. Rye Guy also says, which is always going to be a seller's market, but you got to overpay. And if you're not going to overpay in free agency, it's got to be in trade. In which Top Line J also says, rather overpay at the deadline and then overpay in free agency. Quick thoughts on that as I look for the quote here.
Yeah, totally agree. The deadline is a spot I'd much rather try to take a big swing on and potentially overpay than free agency. Free agency is where you really end up making some of the biggest mistakes that you can make. So, 100% agree with that.
So here was Drager's latest from tonight, and this should bring some excitement. Drager tonight, for the right fit, I think Kevin Cheveldayoff and the Winnipeg Jets are willing to spend. I mean, everything from Brock Nelson to a depth forward up front to a quality, experienced D-man. I mean, everything is on the table. Feeling better?
A little bit better. I like the sound of that. But again, if, I'll be Debbie Downer. If what he was saying earlier was just, mouthpiece trying to, help the market, how do we know this isn't just trying to calm the fans down, placate them, so that there's no riot?
No.
No, we're okay? We're believing this one?
Mikey, I've been all over this. I feel very good about my read. The Winnipeg Jets know what's at stake.
Yeah.
The Winnipeg Jets know what's at stake here. They are going to be spending. They have the cap space. They have the assets. They have the first place team. And now they have a 3-game losing streak going into that deadline that should expose what I think have been their 2 weak spots this year. It's the D past the top 2, and it's the 5-on-5 scoring. That should be out there and obvious.
Yeah.
Now, will he be able to pull off the big swing? That's what we're going to find out. Tougher thing to do, obviously, in this market. I think there's some interesting ways to go about it. You might have to go find some RFAs, which would be an interesting path.
Yep.
I see this chat. Blake Rice says, would McCann solve the current top 6 issue? Could do McCann and Alexiak. what would it take? And I want to talk about this offer, though there was also one that Murad had parlayed around GMs and agents that people felt was close. So this one might be expensive, but I want to use it as a baseline, just because it's the most recent on my mind. Over on the PDO cast, Dimitri had proposed the idea of Seattle receiving for that package that Blake's talking about, Brad Lambert, Ville Heinola, a 25 first, a 27 third, and a 26 conditional second. First, if the Jets make a wild card final, for Jared McCann, who has 2 more years after this year at $5 million, and Jamie Alexiak 1 year at $4.6 million. You hear that price, what is your immediate reaction, Mikey?
That I'm driving Brad Lambert to the airport. I'll even get him a Slurpee on the way, but yeah, I'm making that deal. I'm making that deal all day, and I think it's not that it's a slam dunk and like steal and oh my god they're running away with that. But I feel like those two players fit exactly what both Scott Arniel wants to do, and they're guys that I think actually move the Jets forward in a really impressive way. To capitalize on this window, right? To try to get it right now. So yeah, I make that deal, even though it feels steep, I'm sure for some people, but I feel like it is the exact deal that they need. So yeah, unfortunately, I'm driving him to the airport. We're getting Slurpees, whatever he needs, but we're going.
To answer Blake's first question, I do think both those players really fill those two aspects I'm talking about. You get the dramatic upgrade on the third pair, and Alexei is an interesting player. I don't think he's like the home run defenseman, but he brings a lot of the aspects I think the Jets are going to be looking for. He is the type of guy I actually could see them bumping off Stanley, though I assume one of them is going to play their offhand. He is a vet, but the one thing I find interesting about Alexiak, he seems to be one of those players that's very fit dependent. And his best season came under Bones in Dallas. And we know that Arniel's taken Bones' system, made some tweaks, but it is a player I do think could come in here and help out. The other aspect of Jamie Alexiak is next year, I think having him behind Sandberg and Morrissey might open the door to the Jets trusting Elias Salmonson for a bit of a run on that third pair, which I think would be a positive aspect of having that vet big defenseman that they can maybe trust. As for Jared McCann, I think he's the real piece in all this to get really excited about. Yeah. This is arguably Seattle's best 5-on-5 producer, second best in points per 60 at 5-on-5 this year behind Shane Wright, who's had quite the comeuppance finally. This has been their most consistent guy at 5-on-5 offensively for the last couple of years, and I'm talking about the idea that the Jets need that 5-on-5 offensive boost. He would also likely jump onto your second power play and add another finisher to that group as those goals and those minutes become more important. I see big value in Jared McCann on a $5 million contract for the next 2 years through this window. I think that's the type of player that extends this window from this year and maybe next to into year 3. It provides you Nick Ehlers insurance if he walks out the door while adding an impact player while you still have him at $6 million. So I do think those two fit a lot of the needs in Winnipeg at a level and a price. Alexiak's contract's a little higher than I'd want, though when it comes to big bruising defensemen at the deadline, spin the NHL wheel if they're going to be worth a second-round pick or a fourth-round pick. Some teams might see that extra year as a negative. I think the Jets would be the type of team that sees that as a positive based on some of their historical trades for contracts that were a little bit underwater. A long-winded way to get to the idea, I would be perfectly fine making a trade like that. It does look expensive. It's costing you some real futures. I would love to find a way to change that conditional pick a little bit, but hey, if this team's on a Western Conference or better run, am I really going to be miserable about not drafting in the late 20s the following year when you're still bringing back the core of it?
No. Especially since you've got term on both guys that you'd be getting back. It's worth that risk for that conditional pick. The pick is great and all, but like you said, it'd be a high 20s, and I'd rather a banner than that pick.
This year's first is going to be late 20s. Next year's first is likely going to be late 20s. There's also a chance that this team doesn't make the Western Conference Finals and has that first rounder in their holster next year while they build off of this, which is kind of exciting as well. I mean, at the end of the day, if this team is competing at the level we expect them to, they'd likely have to move that first for a rental. And in this way, you're actually addressing a 5-on-5 core piece for a top 6 level for multiple years. So I'm fine paying this price. The way I'd look at this, honestly, this is what all in looks like, and it's going to hurt a little bit. I found it interesting when I ran a poll on Twitter of 660 votes. It finished dead even 50-50. Normally a sign of a trade that's probably fair.
Yeah,
right?
you're in
Is
the
when you
range
get
of
that
value.
you get that dead in the middle. You don't get the drastic one where a drastic the other. And the other aspect I'd look at, the Winnipeg Jets are genuinely the first place team in the NHL. They genuinely have a window. And with that trade, I do believe that the Winnipeg Jets would be the favorite in the West. I don't see that right now. Personally, I don't have them there. With that trade, I think you get to that level, you get the term, and last but not least, I would find it hard to complain about the situation where you have a first-place team. Chevy finally put his balls on the table, set this team up, plus you kept who I think is the two best prospects in Elias Salmonson and Braden Yeager. I would just have a hard time being upset because I wish this pick was one round lower when this team will then be set up for a multi-year run. Still has those reinforcements on the way that I value as the top end guys of this farm. And there's a very real possibility that this is Brad Lambert's peak value. I'm going to throw that out there. I mean, we're talking about him moving to the wing already. The Jets are flush with winger prospects. They could really use a C, and if he's not going to be that, he's going to get added to the pile of wingers. And if you could parlay that type of asset into help now, I couldn't be upset if that's what Chevy decided to do, even if it seems a bit high.
Yep, 100% agree. When you're looking at Connor Hellebuck, when you're looking at Josh Morrissey, when you're looking at what's left of Mark Scheifele, this is the time to go do that. Overpay, like we said, overpay at the deadline is 100% better than overpaying in free agency. Now is the time for the big swing. You've got the group. You've got all these regular season points banked. Go out, make the big swing, and just be a little proactive with how you're going to put these pieces together. Excuse me. That's going to be so telling to see that not only what comes in, but how they're going to put these pieces together. And yeah, with Brad Lambert, if we're already talking about Lambert going to the wing at the NHL level, then unfortunately he gets added to the list of guys that are technically available. Nobody's off limits in this scenario for a big enough name. So especially if it's not going to be help right now. And if that's Brock Nelson, then that's Brock Nelson. If it's Jared McCann, it's Jared McCann. But we need it's got to be something big, and it's got to be now.
And so, what did you think of Brock tonight?
He's getting on the plane with the Jets and leaving Long Island, right? Like they're just going to take him with him. He's good. That was his audition. You passed. Congratulations. You get the part. And we'll see you on the plane. He was great tonight. I thought he was awesome.
I thought if this was a showcase night for Brock Nelson, the Islanders management has to be happy. He definitely looked like a stud up the middle for the Islanders today, and a piece I would definitely love to see. It's interesting Drager threw his name out there as like the one name he had handy, and that is a guy I definitely think could help here. It'd also be less cost than the last thing we were talking about.
Yeah.
And I will say that I've been trying to dive more around the league and trying to find different fits. And I will say there is pathways where if they do have to go a multi-piece deadline and they can't pull off this big swing to address things, I think there's pathways the Winnipeg Jets can get to a very solid, even number one in the West without that big swing. I think there's options available to them if you wanted to spread the wealth and just make a deep team that's tough to play against. But I do think this is the spot where Kevin Cheveldayoff should swing, and I will steadfastly remain that Kevin Cheveldayoff makes a swing that has us all happy by Friday's deadline.
I'm hoping to get to celebrate a big ad and being wrong for the first time where it's actually a good thing, because that would be wonderful. I would love it. It was interesting that Drager, when he was talking to Gino Reda, specifically mentioned that he said, I think Nelson would be willing to go to Winnipeg. I think there'd be a lot of suitors for Nelson when Lou Lamoriello decides to finally put him in play, which has got to be around the corner. Something that made me laugh is, so during the game, I like to go hang out on social media with the opposing team, go see kind of what they're talking about in their circles. The prevailing theme tonight, right across the board on multiple platforms, was that now everybody was afraid that Lou was just going to keep Lambert after this performance and win tonight, because now he thinks they're still going to make the playoffs because they have a 9% chance or whatever. And so, it wasn't just like one or two people. That was the prevailing fear from everybody across the Islanders fandom, was that Lou was going to see this game and go, oh, no, we got to keep him now. He's going to stay. So it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening in Long Island. You never know with Lou. You just never know.
And that's the thing, too. No one will know about a Lou Lamoriello, Kevin Cheveldayoff deal until one of the two teams announces it on social media.
Yep.
Both of those front offices are two of the best at keeping things in-house. So if something's cooking over there, we won't have a clue until it's done. Let's just be real there.
Yep.
Julian says, Brock still looks like he was around during the Great Depression.
He does.
And Frosty says he needs some Grecian formula. I mean, I wouldn't mind a little War Road Minnesota flavor that was around to sign the Declaration of Independence with the current a state of global affairs to kind of have in our back pocket. Definitely an interesting looking guy that looks like he was born in that time period, but can still play hockey at a high level for being like, 90 years old? More than that, 100-something years old.
107 years old, but he looks great for it, man. Killing it.
Hulk says, and this is what I tend to believe too, and we've seen his name pop up a little bit. If Lou signs Nelson, I just presume that means Dobson is available, which I'd get a lot more excited about if this Neil Pionk thing falls apart. Yeah. I find it hard to imagine the Jets paying all three right-handed D, though maybe. I mean, I've made it no secret. I would love to get a guy like Noah Dobson. I think he's a top 2 to 3 D man who's kind of getting what happened with Devin Toews there, right? So
yep.
I'm interested there. Frosty Winnipeg says the big swing would be Elias Pettersson. And I know I've hyped up Elias more than anyone. I'm a big Elias Pettersson fan. I make no bones about that. I do think that is a trade that's going to happen in the summer now with where his season's kind of trended. I think that's a guy that desperately needs a reset, and I don't know if I would have the stones to make that bet right now with where his game's been.
Yeah.
And I'm a big EP guy. I think that's a change of scenery in the summer move now.
Totally agree. Yeah. Now that Miller's gone, now that it's not a desperation move on their end where you can find better value and maybe get a steal. That's a deal you work out in the summer to try to bring something in like that. But right now, there's another Canucks forward that's been apparently put out onto the market. Blake Grist. What about Brock Besser as a forward option?
It's an interesting one. Part of me would be excited about it. Clearly, a guy that could score some goals probably helps your PP too as well. The one caution I would have is, I could see that one going the Tyler Toffoli way with the lack of speed element. That would be my one hesitation there. If I'm getting a winger out of Vancouver, I'm really pushing for Connor Garland.
Yeah.
You get that pass, the guy that could play up to this pace that they want to play at, the guy that gets in on the forecheck, and the one that could still bury pucks in the front of the net. I think he's more of the Jets mold if you can get him.
Who's going to
and that's who I would focus on the right side. I don't know, actually. Garland's one of those guys who, like a year ago, was seen as a contract dump. And I remember on some of the Top Line Winnipeg episodes with, I think Jor was still with us at that time. I was really hyping up the idea of getting Garland for free because I thought that deal was fine. And you could add a quality piece there. So with that in mind, I don't think Connor Garland would be overly expensive to acquire, even with that extra year, given how the league's kind of viewed him in years past. And I could see the Brock Besser name carrying a little bit more weight than it should.
That's fair. Yeah, it's the flashier name, right? So if you can get Garland at the cheaper price, that's a route that I'd be super interested in going down.
And I think Hall kind of nails this with Besser would have been exciting 3 years ago, not anymore. I mean, I think that's a guy that's just slowed right down, both physically and some of the health stuff. It's a guy I've assumed the Jets would be interested. We've talked about that with the UND connections and whatnot. I just do worry that there's some of the Tyler Toffoli there. And I think we learned that lesson last year compared.
No, that's good. That's something to definitely keep in mind. Over on Facebook, Brad Lavers definitely likes the Seattle, says, I wouldn't mind the Seattle idea. and likes your Garland idea and saying we need a Garland type. So we're getting a lot of agreement over there as well.
I see Turd asks, Nick, do we have the cojones and the pieces to off Nelson and then Bjorkstrand with Alexiak? Does the price come down enough if I swap out McCann? It's an interesting one. I'm not sure what I haven't done enough of a deep dive on Bjorkstrand and what I think the cost would be. I do, just at a glance, think you'd probably have a similar price tag on the 3 of them compared to the 2. I totally might just be overvaluing Jared McCann in the extra 2 years at $5 million as well, and that's totally possible. I'm not sure. It's a good question. I do think it's the kind of avenue, though all 3 have no trade clauses as well. Maybe.
Yeah, the no trade clause part is something you'll definitely have to work out. But if all things being equal there, I definitely think it probably brings the price down to go to Bjorkstrand to where you can swing something to get all 3 pieces. And I don't hate that as an option either, but I would probably still like the McCann Alexiak duo than going Bjorkstrand Nelson Alexiak, but I'd be fine with either. Both are really good options.
Bear Point over on Twitch asks, do you feel Stanley moves at the deadline? I would be surprised. No. Really. I do think it could happen, but I would be surprised. And until I see confirmation that Logan Stanley will no longer wear a Jets jersey, I just can't get excited about the idea.
Absolutely not. No, don't even. It's not worth even thinking about pretending. He's not going anywhere at the deadline. He's a big part of the team. The coaching staff loves him. He's Chevy's draft pick. Chevy loves him. There's no, unless a team is calling specifically for him in a trade, unless whatever team that is, that we're trading with says, I want the 6'7" guy back, and it's a big trade that they're working out, but that is such a minuscule possibility in my mind. If there are any betting sites out there that you can get some decent odds on a Logan Stanley trade, go get him because he's not going anywhere.
Rob Somerville asks, if we're acquiring players at the deadline, do we want them walking as soon as the season is over, or do you look for players who have term left on their contracts? What's your thoughts on that, Mikey?
I've always been a big proponent of trying to find guys with a little bit of extra time still on the deals. The traditional quote-unquote rentals don't usually work out as well. Those are the guys that are the, much higher priced big names that are on the TSN trade board that get all the attention, which drives the price up even more at that time. The NHL, for whatever reason, has been a little bit reluctant to look at trades with, that kind of medium-term trade where you get that extra, year attached to it, which for whatever reason means that the price on those doesn't tend to be as high. So I like trying to find guys in that middle range where, they're here for this year and next year, or this year and, the year after that kind of thing, as opposed to, just the traditional rental, grab them at the deadline and go. But again, that doesn't mean to say that I don't want any of those guys, because there are definitely spots where we can use that to upgrade. But my preference is definitely trying to find that value with a little bit of term.
I'm kind of open to both, because one aspect I do think does get a little overvalued, and I understand why. It is hard for the Winnipeg to play in the free agency game, is I do think historically we've talked ourselves into players with term that was bad term. And at the end of the day, cap space is the most valuable asset. So my theory, the way I look at it is, as long as you can get value that's going to help this team, I'm okay if they walk in the summer. Totally fine with me. At the end of the day, part of that thread I was talking about with the idea that guys leave Winnipeg and end up on this list of guys you'd rather not sign, is you don't want to be the team signing those deals. We're about to do it with number 4. You want to avoid those mistakes so that you continue to have flexibility. You backfill, you find the next version of it, and I think that's something the team's done well. So I'm okay with rentals as long as the price tag for the rental compared to what the player is going to probably bring. That being said, also there's this aspect, Fat Tony says he's not going anywhere because no one wants Stanley. If you can get a quality player on term, I think obviously that's the preference, especially in this market. I just don't want to get married to, we prefer this guy because of term, but that guy might not be as good as the next one.
No, yeah, absolutely. Still always BPA, right? Get me the best player available for what you're trying to do. I think there's always not always. I think just there's an opportunity when you start looking for those guys with that little bit of term because they don't seem to get as much attention each year right at that specific deadline.
Yes. Noah Laforte trying to give us some hopium. Remember when we played Bolio too much and then out of nowhere traded him to Pittsburgh? Maybe we wake up and do the same with Stanley. Julian points out, but if we're trading for a D-man has to be going back, and trading for a guy like Alexiak or Dumoulin would push Stanley out of the lineup. I do think guys like that who have the tenure in the league, Dumoulin's got some rings, do help that equation. And Dumoulin as a free agent rental is someone I think you can get cheap. That would be a quality add on the third pair. That's a name I am intrigued by. We'll see if it pushes Stanley out, but they will have to move D. And I believe we've seen the last game of Ville Heinola in Winnipeg. I think that's inevitable this week as part of a trade. So I would expect him to be in something like that.
Yeah, agreed. I think we're seeing the end of Ville Heinola. And yeah, unless it's Stanley going back, or you're getting both Alexiak and Dumoulin to try to push him out. If it's one, he's playing, and like you said, either he's going to be playing on his offside, or Alexiak or Dumoulin's going to be playing on their offside. It's just he's not coming out with one D ad. It's going to take two at that spot, and that are both, like you said, established, have the tenure, and also bring the size that they want back there. Because Goddard Neal's told us point blank that's what he wants, and that's who gets in.
I gotta answer some slander, absolute slander over on Twitch. Bear Point says I'd go streak down Portage and Maine if we get Mikko, and Big Papa says Nik won't. He hates Mikko. I've never once said I've hated Mikko Rantanen. Never once. Big Papa's a little upset that I pushed him on a deal on Twitter this week. And here it is. Let's just lay it out. Let's listen. Big Papa, close, context, words matter. Let's listen here. My entire take with Mikko Rantanen. If the Winnipeg Jets swung for Mikko Rantanen, it's going to be a big headline move, Winnipeg. It's going to be the type of thing we haven't seen them done. It's going to sell jerseys. It's going to sell tickets. It's going to be one of those exciting moments. I have no doubt about it. I think it would be awfully cool if Mikko Rantanen played for the Winnipeg Jets, just because of what we know around this team. That being said, what I said was, if you're trading Nick Ehlers plus for Mikko Rantanen, I don't believe the Winnipeg Jets take a step forward.
Yep.
Don't believe that. I really don't. If you break down Mikko Rantanen's game, he's a guy that's going to need someone to carry the puck through transition on most nights. He's a guy that has a little bit of PLD in him, where if he's unmotivated, you're going to be a little pissed off with his game.
Yep.
And my entire thought process is, if you want Mikko Rantanen to work, who's the center in Winnipeg it's going to work with? If you want Mikko Rantanen to work, that transition driver is Nick Ehlers. You want them playing together.
Yep.
Never mind the impacts on the power play and all of that. I think the Jets need more help in transition, not to lose their best transition guy to try and get that big name who has, quite frankly, struggled in his NHL career without Nate Mack beside him.
Yeah, his best production came with Mack and Landeskog. The more that he loses ice time, the more his production decreases as well. It's that pie chart is a circle. Like it's ridiculous when you take a look. The less he plays, the less he produces. And then you've got Ehlers who does more.
Everybody.
Well, you've got Ehlers who does more with less than anybody else in the National Hockey League. So going from that to a guy who needs to play a ton of minutes to stay at a productive level, he can't go on the Ehlers diet of playing, 16, 17 minutes and still being a productive member of what we're seeing, right? So, yeah, it just doesn't fit in terms of their systems. It doesn't fit in terms of what the team needs to do. Not that he's a bad player. He's just not the right fit if you're moving Ehlers in the other direction.
Yeah, you'd want those two to play with each other,
Yep.
is my whole point. I don't hate Mikko Rantanen. I think if you're breaking down the game and want the Jets to take a step forward, you want Rantanen and Nick Ehlers to try and take that step. I don't think Rantanen would just seamlessly fall into Winnipeg.
Yeah,
or
Ehlers,
slide into
Rantanen, and
Winnipeg.
Scheifele on a line, and, there you go. You'll have a good time.
Yeah, so just had to clear that up a little bit just to make sure I'm not misquoted
No
and
slander.
my thoughts aren't misconstrued. Yeah, no slander here. Come on. I put enough shit out here you could slander me with. Not that one. Come on. It's
You can
a
do it with the truth.
logical argument. Big Papa also asks about Morgan Geekie on the third line. Like to see that Connor Rabchak had thrown that name as a possibility because I'm starting to look at RFAs as well. I think that's an area where if you're looking for a swing, it might come with RFAs on teams that are looking to transition their mold a little bit or isn't going to want to pay a guy like that. Morgan Geekie's had a pretty damn good year. I would look at him not as a 2C answer. I think he's a Mason Appleton replacement if you're going that way. Or if you're willing to move Lowry up, trying to figure out who could play center between Geekie and Vlad. I think both are better wingers than centers.
Yeah.
But I'd be interested in Morgan Geekie and what he could kind of bring. He kind of fits that mold of the Jets liking those guys that are a bit flexible at wing and center.
Yep.
26-year-old RFA, and I'd be intrigued by that in the right situation.
Yeah, that's a gamble I'd be willing to take a look at. Like you said, he can play wing, he can play center, he can take face-offs at any spot on the ice. And that's a bet in the middle six that I think you can win off of. I like that. I like that move a lot. Plus, hopefully that means that Mason Appleton also rides off into the free agency sunset.
Rob Somerville asks, does Ryan O'Reilly fit the bill for a 2C slot between Ehlers and Perfetti, or is he past his best before date? I would definitely take a Ryan O'Reilly. I just think that guy's a total gamer that you'd want in your room. We'll see if he'd be interested in waiving the non-trade clause that Barry Trotz is going to honor for him.
Yeah, that's right.
And the one team I just can't get out of my sights right now, and it's a team. Remember, Mikey, you were kind of describing it as risky. If you're really like trying to outweigh a team for that deal. And this might be the most risky team to do it with, but I can't take my eyes off Buffalo. And their GM is not the most reliable when it comes to a situation like that. There's been talk that he's backed out of deals really late. Something happened last year, the deadline. So it's not the ideal situation, but talk about a team that does have RFAs that fit that idea. If you're going to take a big swing and get some term and get some guys in their prime, I can't stop staring at what's going on in Buffalo. I really can't.
That would be... There are ways to grab guys out of Buffalo right now. I think that would be absolutely game changers if they can get it done. And we know Kevin Cheveldayoff is hanging out in Philadelphia right now, right? It's not that far to Buffalo. It would be really easy to, get some phone calls in, maybe have a meeting or two in secret without anybody knowing. But yeah, like we talked about, it's a risky game. It's a risky game of chicken with especially with Buffalo. But you've got some real opportunities with RFAs in Buffalo to make a big splash, and even a potential UFA guy the year after next in Alex Tuch.
So Frosty Winnipeg, you're correct that ROR does not have a no trade clause, but because he signed a long-term deal this summer, Barry Trotz has publicly made it known that he's going to treat our ROR and how he sees him as a person and player as if he has one. We'll see if he goes back on that. I mean, we've seen teams do crazier things that benefit their team, but that's just what's been publicly discussed. Big Papa names the three names I'm looking at in Buffalo in Alex Tuch, McLeod, and Peterka. And Mikey, I'm going to make this one hard on you. I'm going to make you sweat a little bit.
No.
Because the talk out of Buffalo is it's going to have to be a hockey trade. And I kind of said how I've been talking with someone out of Buffalo just to get an idea of what that might look like. If you can get Peterka and Ryan McLeod, but Cole Perfetti is part of the package going the other way, how do you feel?
Oh, I hate it. I hate it so much. I hate so much of it. Both
Told
guys.
you I was going to make you sweat. Told you I was going to make you sweat a little bit.
Getting both guys
in the deal. There's going to be something attached to Perfetti, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Something
no,
of value.
To fill it out on the Jet side, but both guys coming back for Perfetti being the headliner, right?
Yeah. Perfetti, a second and something, let's say.
Make the pick like a fourth, and like we can talk.
It's not happening.
Then I don't want to do it. Then I don't want to
bro.
do it. I'm out. I'm bailing. I'm out. I hit the button. No deal, Howie.
Chicken shit. I'm doing that all fucking day.
I'm a chicken shit.
I'm sorry, Cole, to try and make this team a wagon. If I'm getting 2 top 9 quality players right now, I'm sorry, Cole. I'm sorry, buddy. I appreciate you, but you got to do that, Ben.
Yeah. Like I probably do it, but I'm gonna be real sad the entire drive to the airport. Like, I'm going to be crying into my Slurpee this time, which is really unfortunate. Nobody wants to see that.
Yeah, no, it's something I've been thinking about this week is potentially Cole Perfetti and some future assets could turn into JJ Peterka and Ryan McLeod. And I got to say, I would be awfully giddy. As much as I like Cole,
They don't
I'd
want
be
a
awfully
6'7"
giddy.
defenseman instead? He's real big.
No, no, unfortunately.
Well, Fat Tony
See,
says,
hey, you're getting some pushback.
yeah, Fat Tony says,
Well, I'm
give up
getting
the
some
best
pushback.
player in the deal. No thanks.
It comes to me with, I just wonder where the Jets are going to value Cole Perfetti as the games get tougher again. And you're getting 2 top-9 legit players for the future. And I'm also not sure if Cole Perfetti is going to be the best future player there. I'm getting some support on that side too. So it's one of those deals that, hey, it could be a 50-50.
I still think the future of the Jets runs through Cole, to be honest. I do. I really think there's something special there if he gets the opportunity. But man, that one hurts. That's a tough deal. That's a tough call. I like that.
I got to make you sweat a little bit. I got to make you sweat. Bear Point gets to somewhere that I have a theory on as well. Do you think Ristolainen could be someone the Jets go after, or would you like to see on the Jets? I'll let you start, but I got a little bit of a theory going on here.
What's your theory?
Well, give your thoughts on, because I know I'm gonna get to the buffet a little bit here.
On Risto himself. Risto's the guys they've been linked to countless times in the past. We know that there's attraction there, right? They've swiped right on Risto so many times, and there's been a couple you up messages, but they've never sealed the deal. It's never been my first choice. It's never been the deal that I wanted them to make. We've talked a bit about him this year being, a little bit better looking than what we've seen in the past, maybe, but I don't know, man. That's still one that I'm staying away from, to be honest.
Fat Tony 202 says, did JJ become something recently? Man, that guy can break games open offensively. Defensive side's a bit of a struggle still. He's nowhere near Cole Perfetti defensively. I don't know if he'll ever be.
No.
Plays with some edge, and I just do think the Jets could use that offensive push, and you're still getting a player moving forward. That being said, Risto, really interesting, because I thought that was going to be a player that, especially in a seller's market, teams are going to drool over, but that's not what we're hearing out of Philly at all. The 2 years at 5.1 is really scaring teams off, which tells me I think teams have the same hesitancy around Risto as a lot of people based on the history. That being said, my theory is because they've wanted a first-round pick to move him, and now they're publicly floating the idea that, hey, we'll eat 50%. And while they're floating this, they're saying, but it's going to come at a cost. I actually think Risto is going to move with retention, but it's going to be a first, and the retention portion over multiple years is going to be less than you'd expect, because I think it's one of those situations they're going to really value getting a first out of the player that hasn't come. It seems like seconds have kind of been on the table there. So I'm wondering if you see a trade-off between the Flyers and a contender to eat cap. That first is going to be in there, and the normal amount you'd pay for that retention isn't going to be quite as steep over multiple years.
How much do you think they'll be willing to retain? That's going to play the biggest part, I think, in all of this.
They've reported that they would do up to 50%, which would bring it down to a $2.55 million player. That would bring a lot of the elements the Jets are missing defensively. I'm intrigued there.
If they're getting that close enough to 50% on the retention, I'm back on board. I'm willing to take that shot then for sure. The price going back will be that'll be interesting. But yeah, at 50% retention, I'm a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, we'll see. Just a theory I have based on where the public reporting is at with that one. Sometimes you want to try and read between the lines. Sometimes I do it too much, but it is a theory I have with Risto. And I do wonder about the Jets in that position where if they're getting a $2.55 million player for a first plus some type of mid asset, I do think the Jets would be interested in that. They would lock in the right side, though that right side would have a lot of margin for error potentially.
Ooh, it would be it'd be some fireworks for sure. Going back to our previous conversation about McLeod and JJ, Billy Waldner over on Facebook says, "Didn't you watch McLeod during the Oilers run? Soft as shit." How do you feel about that?
I would take McLeod in a heartbeat in the center of this group. If you had a top three group of Lowry, Scheifele, McLeod, and then Nemeskov on the fourth, I think you're in a great position up the middle. That guy is a two-way center. He's been involved in a long run, so he's been a part of a long run. I'm in on Ryan McLeod. I don't care about this idea that he was soft in the playoffs. And give me a player like that all day for this team to create more depth.
If you're getting JJ and McLeod in a deal with Perfetti going back the other way as the only real piece off the roster, where would you like to see those guys play?
I would like to see McLeod beside a Nino on like the third line, bring some speed to him. I mean, this is one of the fastest players in the NHL too,
Yep.
and this is the type of shutdown center I think would really learn something from Adam Lowry as he continues to develop in the NHL. And then Peterka, I'm looking at beside like a Lowry and Ehlers.
Right on.
It's kind of where I'm curious about. Julian says Jets need a guy that can light a fire under the group when they're facing adversity in the playoffs, someone who is willing to drop the gloves and energize this team. And this is a part of the aspect of why I find the idea of getting a Stanley Cup ring somewhat important for this core this year as they prepare for a run. Is I do think, given some of the stumbles come playoff time in the past, having a guy like that in the room to kind of grab it by the balls and say, hey, we're not going down this way, could help this group in a way that they don't currently have. So I'm interested in Julian's thoughts there. And Bear Point says the same. We need a player or two that has gone deep, and McLeod fits that. And he fits the pace of this team's game. I'm not with Billy on this one. Let's put it that way.
The other kind of unsaid part of it too is we can't have Adam Lowry keep going out there and taking fighting majors every game, taking himself off the ice for long stretches of the time, potentially hurting his hand in a fight. Like it's great when you're standing up for your guys, when they've got to settle some stuff, whatever. But to have it happen too often, it's just you get that risk each time of, man, he could really end up breaking his hand and being out for a long stretch of the playoffs, which would absolutely tank the Jets. So yeah, getting a guy in there to kind of help out Laus a bit to take those fighting reps may be worth looking at.
So, Mikey, you know what I just heard from you?
What's that?
That you're a Logan Stanley in the lineup truther.
No, we have to add somebody in.
That's his job, bro. Why are you trying to steal the guy's job?
Look, his figure skating training has gone real well. He hit those purees, perfectly in that other one with those nice spins, but he's not a fighter. I don't want to see the poor guy fighting. You can tell he doesn't want to be doing it. It's not him, and he's going to end up hurting himself someday. So, no, send him out there. Alexiak's got a bunch of career fights. Somebody like that who, you know what I mean, who can actually do it at the NHL level.
All right, and it comes out. Choices says Stan is a dancer, not a fighter, and hey, it's one of those things I don't think you can teach killer instinct. I think it's one of those things you have or you don't, and I just don't think it was meant for him, and that's okay. Yeah. I respect him for it. But that being said, we've been going on for a while here. I want to thank From Financial for their continued support of the program. This was the landing strip. Make sure you like, subscribe. Send this to friends and family, man. We're trying to grow this community and keep this show going and kind of build off it from here. I know Frosty Winnipeg really wants us to have a super chat button. So to get that, we need 141 more subscribers on YouTube. So, hey, I keep pumping this. If you guys want to share it, that'd be great. We'll be here all week as it comes up to the deadline. We're going to be recording right when we get off a bit of a Jets trade deadline primer where you can kind of just take an overview of the Jets situation. We're going to have that out tomorrow. Be on the lookout for that. And then we'll be going live deadline day, either 10 or 11 in the morning. Me and Mikey will sort that out tonight. Right past the deadline and probably an hour past, just breaking down what's going around the league, where the Jets fit in, where some of their moves might fit in the lineup. We're going to be breaking that all down. So if you're doing nothing Friday, come hang out with the boys. We're going to be chatting just like this, but for like 5-6 hours instead of 1. And I'm looking forward to it. I live for deadline day. Want to thank you all for your continued support, and we'll see you next show.
Right on. Good night, everybody.